specifically Professor Farooqi and Professor R.K. Singh. It's truly an honor to be here. This is a historic university. This is a university that has been esteemed through the ages. I grew up hearing legendary tales about this place, and I'm delighted to learn it's a central university now, and it is on the upswing. I fervently and earnestly hope it'll recapture and do more than recapture the glory years of yore. And from the brief interactions I've had with a few faculty here, I think the university seems to be in good hands. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and hopefully we will get there. So, without further ado, I will crack on, and there are certain rules of the game I must inform you about before I crack on. First, I'm open to any question under the sun. Second, follow-up questions are more than welcome. If you think I'm being an idiot, just tell me why. If you disagree with my point, hammer me, and hammer me hard. And this is meant to be a Socratic discourse, or what we used to call a Shastrarth. So I'm not an oracle. I have traveled a lot, and I have certain views on the world, many of which are fallible, and it's up to people here to prove my fallibility. So, India and the world. India is an ancient civilization, as is China. Sometimes we forget that there are other ancient civilizations. We tend to get a little too smug sometimes, and sometimes we tend to get a little too insecure. We forget we are an ancient civilization too. So, both India and China have enormous contributions to the planet, to humanity. The Chinese, of course, gave us paper, they gave us the compass, they gave us Confucian philosophy, they gave us poetry from the Tang dynasty, and lest we forget, they gave us a merit-based bureaucracy. Our current bureaucracy is based on the Chinese model. Our mandarins are selected through an extensive examination. It is very Confucian. Actually, globally, everyone follows the Chinese model. We don't appoint someone's nephew, someone's cousin twice removed. And one of the hallmarks of modernity is that we have a merit-based admission system to run the apparatus of the government. And that is a Chinese idea. It's not a British idea. The British rediscovered it. So much, and of course I'm doing no justice to what China has given us. I've just adumbrated the outline of an outline of an outline. So let's get on to India, because that is the focus of my lecture, and Indians have contributed enormously to the world as well, whether it comes from our speculative philosophies, to the decimal system, to very many scientific practices that Europe discovered much later, whether it was in surgery, Sushruth, or whether it was in chemistry, or even physics. So we have a peculiar and particular genius, and it is apposite that I start talking about what A.L. Basham called the wonder that was India. And we have a professor of ancient history sitting in the first row, and he's nodding. And what is it that made India the wonder that it was? And part of it was that we were a riverine civilization with deep rivers flowing from the Himalayas, carrying silt, making the soil deep and fertile. And that abundance of water and that richness of soil meant that this civilization could afford to be a little more speculative. You could sow seeds in many ways. If you were industrious, you could transplant paddy. If you were a little lazy, you could just throw the seeds. You had 3 growing seasons. Europe didn't. The Middle East, you had to control the oasis. And there was a very rigid time schedule you had to follow. And if you missed, well, woe begone, because there wasn't that plenty. So a riverine civilization lent itself to prosperity, lent itself to a certain material basis for speculation to flourish, and we therefore became advanced early. Because we had that base, we could afford to go to trade. And from the earliest times, archaeological evidence points out to trading ties between Harappa and Mesopotamia. Trade persists. Roman historians complain about the flow of serfdom into the Indian economy. There is constant paranoia about the balance of payments, or what we would in modern terms call the balance of payments. Everyone in the Roman Empire is insecure about Romans paying too much to import muslin and other fine stuff from India. It's reminiscent of the complaints one hears in the US today about the balance of payments vis-a-vis China. So maybe, some things never change, or the more the world changes, the more it remains the same. So we did pretty well in trade. And because we had such a multiplicity of activities very early, along with that came a plurality of philosophies. And by that I mean the first atheist text in the world was here, Singh. We had so many schools of philosophy, from Singh to Nyaya to Vaisasik. We had what later emerged as major world religions, Buddhism and Jainism, major in terms of philosophy, maybe not so much in terms of geographical extent. Mind you, the conversion to Buddhism and Jainism occurred through discussion. It occurred through what we would call Shastrarth. There weren't missionaries going out proselytizing as in modern times. In modern times, you have a battle for souls going on all across Africa. You can draw a zigzag line. On the one side are missionaries who was funded by Baptists who oppose evolution and abortion, and of course the Roman Catholic Church. And on the other side are Wahhabi missionaries funded by the lovely Saudi Arabia. So you didn't have that. Back then, these religions didn't spread either through the sword or through concerted missionary activity funded by a large amount of gold. There was an openness and confidence to India. Until very recently, Professor Farooqi has been in Oxford. I obviously studied there too. Until recently, which is barely 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, you had to be from the Church of England to study in the University of Oxford. Methodists were not welcome, Presbyterians were not welcome, Lutherans were not welcome. Anybody who didn't belong to the Church of England was ineligible to study in this great and hallowed university. Unsurprisingly, Darwinism didn't come from Oxford. It was born in London. A number of the great utilitarian philosophers didn't operate out of Oxford. They operated out of London. And in the 19th century, it was London that was the intellectual center of Britain. Oxford was for the elite, members of the Lucky Sperm Club, who generally have a cushy life throughout human history. We, on the other hand, in Nalanda, admitted everyone. Huan Chang could come and study there. Everyone was welcome. Islamic philosophers were welcome, travelers were welcome, the Chinese were welcome, the Japanese were welcome, and they trickled in. All that you needed to do to get in was the Dwarapala test, which is you went and talked to the scholar at the gate and he figured out you were bright and you were sincere and you'd work hard and you'd add to the richness of the life in that institution, and you were in. Now, that is confidence. When you know who you are to such a degree that you open your doors to everyone and you are willing to engage with the world. It also led to a dynamism. And that dynamism meant that Indian culture spread. The biggest Hindu temple is not in India. It's Angkor Wat. It's in Cambodia. We forget that. The biggest Buddhist structure is not in India either. It's Borobudur. So we look at the cultural influence of India, and it spanned all of Asia. In fact, there are just two centers that have given birth to great religions. One is the Middle East, starting from, let's say, Mecca to Jerusalem, that area, and the other is the Gangetic Valley, and we are here in the presence of time and history and greatness. Sometimes we forget that because it's hard. Even, let's say, if you're in Bethlehem and you're a Palestinian, to remember the richness of your heritage, because the current can be so depressing. And boy, if we think, we are in a bad shape, think about the Palestinians. They suffer apartheid. So, or the modern day version of apartheid. So, there was a dynamism, and that led to a huge cultural footprint. And it went west too, lest we forget, because a lot of the generals of Alexander the Great became Buddhist. You had a whole school of art called the Indo-Greek School of Art, or the Gandhar School of Art. And the tallest statue of the Buddha until very recently was Bamiyan, which was blown up by the Taliban. So, Islam was what defined us. Now, obviously, there was decline. Obviously, somewhere down the line, we slipped up. Now, we can feel very guilty about it, but I think one of the things we have to get over as a culture is understand what happened instead of feel guilty about it, because everyone slipped up. Every ancient culture slipped up. It's not just us. The Iranians slipped up, the Chinese slipped up, we slipped up, the ancient Greeks slipped up, the Romans slipped up. So no ancient culture failed to slip up. Now, the causes might have been different for each of them, but the fact of the matter is all of them slipped up. Ascribe reasons such as feudalism. We can ascribe reasons such as rigidification of the caste system, which foreign travelers such as Fa Hien started observing, such as Yuan Chang started observing. Untouchability was becoming a big deal. So we have historical records of certain trends. Now, obviously, the records are not as good as they should be because of certain factors. But clearly, there's something rotten in the state of, or in the states of India, to take a line from Hamlet, or paraphrase a line from Hamlet. And so, a weakened Indian civilization or a weakened Indian set of states were vulnerable to external aggression. And mind you, this was a time of turbulence all across the Middle East and Central Asia. So Ghazni invaded India 17 times in 25 years, and we all know the stories of the loot he carried on the back of trains of camels and donkeys and horses. Ghori, of course, did one better. He conquered much of North India. The Battle of Tarai in 1192 and the Battle of Chandavar in 1194 meant that everything up to Bihar was suddenly his domain, or the domain of of the new Sultanate. Now, they might not have been able to retain it straight away. They expanded, they won the battle, but they couldn't retain absolute control. But from now on, the die was cast. 1198 is when Nalanda is razed to the ground. The scholars are slaughtered. The buildings are razed to the ground. And the man